This is Christian Breton of Quebec City, Quebec. You're listening to the International Radio Report on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal.
Welcome, everybody, to the International Radio Report for Sunday, September the 10th, 2023, here on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal. My name is Sheldon. Gilles is with me, as usual. We thank you for tuning in to our 30 minutes of news and information from the world of radio. You can reach us by email, radioreport@yahoo.com. Our show is live streaming and archived on the CKUT website, ckut.ca here in Montreal. You can go and check out our show and other programs also on CKUT. Today, our Facebook group, International Radio Report. We have two new members, Jay in India and Charles in Montreal. We welcome both of you. Brings us to 937 members. Please check out the Facebook group. You can join and participate and read the stories that get posted up there. Our YouTube channel, where you can catch the current edition of the show and previous editions. Our YouTube channel is called International Radio Report at IRR. And there are 870 subscribers. And our newest edition is the X account, or formerly Twitter, at IRRCKUT. You can follow us there as well. And we're putting up links to the stories that we can't put up on our Facebook page any longer due to the restrictions on news links. Do check them out both on the YouTube channel and on Twitter if you want the links to any of the stories you hear on the show. All right, we'll get down to business for this week. And the first item about a station, actually not a station, but a program that you may have been listening to on Shortwave over the last few years, I guess now. Texas Radio Shortwave. And Terry Colgan, the manager of Texas Radio Shortwave, sent a notice around to us and to various radio clubs and shortwave listening groups saying that September 10th, today, is the final day of the Texas Radio Shortwave broadcasts for a while. He says, "We realize this is abrupt and apologize to listeners for the short notice. We may be back on the air, but there are no immediate plans to do that. We'll inform hobby and media outlets if the situation changes." We're not really sure what happened here. I did send Terry a quick note just to make sure that he was okay personally, and seems to be all right. So we're not sure exactly why the decision, whether it's financial, whether it was just maybe too much work putting it all together. Maybe he wasn't getting a lot of feedback from listeners. That can happen as well. Anyways, a lot of speculation, but also a number of interesting comments from people saying how much they enjoyed the programming and sad that it's no longer on the air. Hopefully, it will be back at some point in time. It was always very creative programming, A lot of feature programming on artists and events, and not just your average let's play music radio station. It was quite an interesting show.
And our next story, we have what happens to AM radio after the August recess. This is by the NRB, the National Religious Broadcasters, via Radioworld. The fall could be a busy time for broadcasters on Capitol Hill. Earlier this year, with leading automakers poised to remove AM radio capabilities from new electric vehicle lines, lawmakers in the House and Senate worked across the political aisle to introduce a pair of proposals that would preserve AM radio in the auto dash. Even with Congress in recess, the AM Radio for Every Vehicle Act has continued to benefit from the issue's momentum. In recent days, the legislation has attracted several new co-sponsors for a total of 150 co-sponsors in the House and 34 in the Senate. The bill sailed through Senate markup in July. Prior to the markup, a manager's amendment package of amendments from the lead sponsor or committee chair introduced a few tailored changes, such as narrowing the bill to passenger motor vehicles as opposed to motor vehicles, more generally, and revising the requirement that radio be conspicuous to merely easily accessible. Changes were also made to the effective date and to the fee structure, but the core elements of the bill, requiring that AM radio will remain in cars and be placed in cars that have eliminated it, was not changed. Once the Senate is back in session, the bill must be brought up before it is considered on the floor. This can happen by unanimous consent or by voting to adopt a motion to proceed to the bill. After this step of the bill process happens, senators can then offer amendments. Unlike in the House, amendments in most circumstances are not subject to germaneness rules and can sometimes include aspects that are unrelated to the bill. Furthermore, there is no limit to debate at each step of the process. Motions to proceed, amendments, the bill itself. So there is no way to cut off debate to force a vote. This makes the bill's time and debate on the floor unpredictable, but given its bipartisan support and quick progress so far, S1669 has a good chance of avoiding these procedural difficulties. Once the bill is passed on the Senate floor, all eyes will turn to the other chamber to see what happens with the House companion bill, potentially paving the way to the President's desk. This fall is an excellent time to write, call, or even meet with your representative in Congress to share about the positive impact of AM radio on listeners and tell them about the important community service activities going on at your stations. And of course, you can contact policy@nrb.org for more on how to communicate with lawmakers about the issue. So, lots of talk still in the air, and it's still, last week we had the new ads that were going on the radio. So the momentum is still there. Let's hope that it continues and that it goes through fast so that AM radio continues to be in cars.
Yeah, I think the little changes they made in the wording were important to specify passenger motor vehicles, which makes it very clear that we're talking about, cars and trucks and that sort of thing. So, and to make it easily accessible rather than conspicuous. So they're starting to sort of fine tune it a little bit as well to make sure that everything is nicely covered in there. So yeah, if you're in the US, look up those ways to contact your representatives and let them know how you feel about the future of AM radio. Speaking of AM radio, our next story takes us to New York City. And the headline is Cousin Brucie's 60-plus year radio career honored by WABC Radio. This comes from Radio Inc. 77 WABC and its owners, John and Margot Katsimatsis, honored iconic radio personality Cousin Brucie, also known by his real name of Bruce Morrow, for his 6-decade-long career in a special gala that took place on September the 7th in New York City. Cousin Brucie first joined WABC in 1961, and one of the owner's first actions was, after requiring WABC 770 in March 2020, was to bring him back to the airwaves. The veteran radio host returned that September to host Saturday Night Rock and Roll Party. Over the years, he has been inducted into several halls of fame and received multiple awards for his contributions to the radio industry. His influence extends beyond radio. He's appeared in films, Broadway shows, and television, and has been active in philanthropic work and authorship. Cousin Brucie said, quote, "When John called me, I couldn't believe what was happening. Here was a talk radio station owner asking me to come home and play music Saturday evenings on 77 WABC. I can't thank John and Margot enough for their vision. It's been fun and rewarding, and the listeners love it." Red Apple Media and 77 WABC President Chad Lopez added, "John's programming instincts have been spot on. We're giving listeners what they want, big-name talent, and a winning mix of news, music, lifestyle, and entertainment programs. Our success in just 3 years has been phenomenal, and Cousin Brucie is a very big part of that." And I know a lot of people that do listen to that show on Saturday night. It's like flashback. It's just like going back into the 60s when he was at his peak. So we have a clip that we'd like you to listen to, give you a little more background and hear the iconic voice himself of Cousin Brucie on or 770 kilohertz WABC in New York.
His personality is infectious and his voice unforgettable.
Cousins, these are the Beatles, John, Paul, George, and Ringo. Listen.
Bruce Morrow, better known as Cousin Brucie, is undoubtedly one of the most famous radio disc jockeys in the world.
I'm in the most delicate position with people. I'm in the shower. I'm in the bathroom. I'm taking a bath. I'm in cars. I'm in bed. I'm shopping with people.
I remember in person, he was just very, very nice. And he talked with me for 5 or 10 minutes about rock music and gave me like 4 or 5 albums.
He had a really loud voice, he talked really fast, and he played great music, and he was on the very first transistor radio that I ever owned.
Long before streaming, there was Cousin Brucie on the ones and twos, spinning records and launching music careers across the country. With a career spanning over 60 years, the 86-year-old is probably most known for introducing the Beatles to the American audience.
They brought up my record with an armed guard. It was it had a wrist bracelet attached to him with an attaché case, and I couldn't have the record till 9 o'clock.
The exclusive sneak peek of the band's I Want to Hold Your Hand ahead of its 1963 release reached 40 states at the time, creating a defining moment in pop culture and radio history, solidifying Morrow as radio royalty.
I was very lucky to be in the way when they came here. They called me and they thanked me. They said, "Hi, Cousin Brucie." And they gave me all kinds of nice pats on the back for putting their records on the air.
After almost 40 years, he returned to the station in 2020 and can be heard every Saturday night, serving up the classics and so much more.
He plays the songs that people really, really want to hear. I was in the car just this Saturday night, and he was playing a couple of songs. I had tears in my eyes by the time we were going to dinner. And that's what it's all about.
Now, as the station celebrates its centennial anniversary, Cousin Brucie is being awarded with a proclamation from the mayor's office and a studio named in his honor. And to mark the special occasion, he recreated the British invasion with a needle drop of the iconic Beatles record. Taking us back in time to an iconic moment that changed music forever. In Midtown, I'm Stacey Engooden, Pix 11 News.
So yes, in an era where we did listen to music on AM radio.
Yeah, exactly. Top 40, basically, and you heard mixes of, Motown and California sounds like the Beach Boys and British Invasion all coming together, and so much new music, so much creative talent out there at the time. And to hear it in the format, if you've listened to the program on Saturday nights on WABC, it sounds like you're listening to the 60s and 70s radio. It's got a special sound to it, a special feel to it. So check it out. And that voice is certainly an iconic one. So nice to see that he has been celebrated and honored by WABC for his work there and his continued work there.
So what's happening with our sun? Well, the sun has been quite active this week. We had a few disturbances that did create some geomagnetic unrest. But overall, the solar activity has been quite high. Nice to hear the propagation going on very, very well when higher frequencies are propagating when the conditions are quiet. There's sunspot AR 3421 and 22 that pose threat for some Earth-directed M-class solar flares. Sunspot numbers 135, the solar flux 161. Unless we get some solar flares and stuff like that, conditions should be quiet in general. If you want to witness all of those cool propagation effects of good solar activity, well, you got to turn on a radio and listen.
This is John Fisher of North Chelmsford, Massachusetts. I listen to the International Radio Report every Sunday morning at 10:30 on CKUT 90.3 FM in the fair city of Montreal.
We move off the North American continent and head to South America. We had a story a couple of weeks ago about radio stations being shut down in Venezuela. We have some more detailed information on that with 2 audio clips coming through the VOA News via Radioworld. The headline was about Venezuela's oldest radio station falling silent. That is the Radio Caracas Radio, or RCR, which had its last show on June the 30th after a 93-year history. They say that they could no longer keep the station operating under increasingly difficult circumstances. We'll let you listen to these couple reports. I think it's quite interesting to get an overview of just what is happening in Venezuela with respect to radio, and it's not good news.
Since 1930, Radio Caracas Radio has broadcast news to the people of Venezuela. Even when the government revoked its license in April 2019, the station found ways to keep broadcasting, switching to YouTube. But after weeks without power and concerns over safety of staff, Radio Caracas Radio, or RCR, announced it was going off air.
There are many signs alerting us that we are at high risk. We gave it a lot of thought. Is it worth the risk? Having our assets seized? Having people jailed? Is it worth it?
RCR's listeners could hear news and views, including those of Venezuela's political opposition. Its closure on June 30th was the latest in a series of stations being forced off the air. In 2022 alone, the Venezuelan government ordered the closure of 81 stations, says Espacio Público, a Venezuelan nonprofit that advocates free speech. Venezuela's Ministry of Communication and Information did not respond to VOA's request for comment. Diosdado Cabello, a senior lawmaker and member of Venezuela's National Assembly, says freedom of expression is guaranteed in Venezuela.
Freedom of expression does not belong to the media. It does not belong to the owners of radios, TV stations, or newspapers. Freedom of expression belongs to the citizens.
Journalists at RCR are concerned about how the closure will affect audiences. José Domingo Blanco was a host for RCR.
I wonder if they are really aware and conscious of what the closing of another media outlet means.
For RCR, a decline in advertising and a failure to secure a stable internet connection to broadcast via YouTube was the final blow.
How do you keep this radio station going? Even if the staff are putting their hearts into this for their country, you can't.
The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights and media watchdog Reporter Without Borders both have cited concerns over the loss of independent sources of news in Venezuela. For Adriana Núñez Rabascal in Caracas, Venezuela, Veronica Villafañe, VOA News. Media censorship has risen to new heights in Venezuela, with a record number of radio stations closed, even as the Venezuelan Journalists Association, CNP, documented marginally fewer physical attacks in the past 12 months.
There is a policy of censorship, prosecution of the media. Although it is true that physical aggression against journalists decreased, we saw an increase in radio station closures from 4 in 2021 to 104 in 2022.
The state communications regulator cited licensing breaches for many of the closures, and lawmakers in 2022 denied the action was related to the broadcaster's content. But Carlos Correa, director of the free expression nonprofit Espacio Público, says the moves appear to be part of a policy to limit independent media.
This year, we have documented the highest number of closures since 2001. This situation indicates that the government seems to be trying to reconfigure the ownership structure of these stations.
Adding to worries for journalists are new efforts by President Nicolás Maduro's government to reform media laws. The National Assembly is discussing proposals on regulating social media, including requiring platforms to have an in-country office to handle complaints.
We're going to regulate and control because in recent years, Venezuela has been a victim of psychological warfare through messages on social networks.
But reporters working in an already restrictive environment are wary of the plans. And Carlos Julio Rojas, an independent journalist and member of the National Press Workers Union, says pro-government supporters sometimes use social networks to generate smear campaigns against those in media.
We've seen how the Nicolás Maduro regime's dominance over communications continues to get stronger. What's their end goal? To close that last space that exists for freedom of expression?
If passed, the bill could add to Venezuela's already poor ranking on the Global Press Freedom Index, which measures the ability of journalists to work freely. The watchdog Reporters Without Borders says media there work in a restrictive environment with policies that threaten the full exercise of independent journalism. For Álvaro Algarra in Caracas, Venezuela, Veronica Villafañe, VOA News.
What is sad in here is it's like a wheel that's spinning backwards. Everything's going bad and everything's wrong. There doesn't seem to be a way to actually reverse that. Not only is probably money really, really tough to get by in Venezuela for any radio station, and they talk about how even internet is bad enough that even thinking of streaming online is complicated. And the fact that you probably can't really say what you want because the government is listening, and in one of the clips you can hear them clearly talking about, we need to regulate what's being said on the radio, and it's like, tough times in Venezuela right now.
So you found an interesting story that's making the rounds. So we go from Venezuela a little bit further south, actually a lot further south, about as far south as you can go.
So, new shortwave transmitter for LRA-36, Radio Nacional Arcangel San Gabriel. This is via Adrian Korol via shortwave listening post. So the Defense Minister, Jorge Tayana, together with the Joint Antarctic Commander, Brigadier General Edgar Calandin, the head of Radio and Television Argentina, Rosario Lufrano, and the Executive Director of Radio Nacional, Alejandro Ponlezica, headed a ceremony on the donation of a shortwave transmitter to LRA-36 located at the Antarctic base Esperanza. The action, which is part of a new collaboration between the Joint Antarctic Command and public media entity RTA, will allow the station to significantly improve its coverage and signal quality, thus keeping its international reach and fulfilling the objective of disseminating the work of the armed forces and the scientific personnel stationed in Argentina's Antarctic bases. The minister said it is important for all Argentine men and women to have in their minds and hearts that there is a part of our territory down there and that there are Argentine men and women working hard in that continent. On his part, Lufrano said, "We have always said that our national radio and public TV must be broadcast by land, by sea, by air, and we are fulfilling that mission. It has been an honor to bring this piece of equipment on board of icebreaker ARA Almirante Irizar so that they could listen to all our programming, listen to our radio, and watch our public television. This transmitter will allow us to spread Argentine culture." Xavier Gratz, the donor of the transmitter, was present, and he stressed that the transmitter is entirely manufactured in Argentina. The event was broadcast by AM 870 and the entire public radio network throughout the country. LRA-36 began transmission on October 20th, 1979, and since then has been operating nonstop from the Esperanza base in Antarctica, Argentina. It is one of the most sought-after stations by shortwave listeners from all over the world, and its signal has been picked up in places as distant as Alaska, Iceland, Japan, most European countries, and Latin America. It is the only public radio station that broadcasts from Antarctica on shortwave, a characteristic that, added to the fact that it is operated by personnel of the Joint Antarctic Command, makes it unique in relation to the other stations of Radio Nacional, such as RAE. In 2022, and for the first time, the entire LRA-36 team was integrated by women only. The same happens this year and in 2024 as well. Radio Nacional staff, teachers from the Universidad Nacional de Quilmes, RAE, and the Antarctic Joint Command, under the coordination of Juan Carlos Benavente, all take part in training of the station staff as well as in the general coordination. The transmitter will have a power of 10 kilowatts and is expected to be working effectively during the Antarctic Campaign 2024. So that's good news. I've been hearing it at certain times of the year when the propagation and the is just right. Even during a couple of live shows last spring, we were able to hear it quite well. A surprising signal. And now with 10 kilowatts, I expect that to be even more regular catch. And it's kind of cool to think that you're listening to a station from Antarctica.
Yeah, I found it a little odd that a country like Argentina is putting most of their shortwave efforts into the Antarctic station.
Yep.
There were shortwave stations in Argentina. Most of them have disappeared. But it seems, a station that was almost a novelty over the years and really a DX target for shortwave listeners has now become more mainstream with this, a big ceremony and talking about using it to promote Argentine culture, etc. It's really a different approach to what they're doing with that station. I almost got the feeling in the past that it was just kind of something to keep the staff occupied when they weren't working, because there's not much else to do in Antarctica unless you like penguins. It's just such a remote place, and especially over the winter months, man, you just don't step outside.
So we have upcoming ham radio contests.
We'll run down what's coming up next weekend for you. First off, we have the Scandinavian Activity Contest, CW. 1200 September 16th to 1200 September 17th, UTC or Zulu, organized by the Nordic Amateur Radio Union. The aims of the contest are to promote amateur radio activity in Scandinavia and to encourage amateur radio communications between Scandinavian and non-Scandinavian amateur radio stations. The bands are 80 through 10 meters, and it is a CW event.
There's the Texas QSO Party, 1400 Zulu, September 16th to 20 hours Zulu, September 17th, organized by the Texas DX Society. All HF bands except the work bands, plus 6 and 2 meters, and it's all modes.
There's a QRP Afield event, 1500 Zulu to 2100 Zulu, September the 16th. It's organized by the QRP Club of New England, 160 through 10 meters. The modes CWSSB, AM, PSK, and more. And it is low powered, though, a QRP event.
There's the New Hampshire QSO Party, 1600 Zulu, September 16th to 22 hours Zulu, September 17th, organized by the Port City Amateur Radio Club. Bands 160 through 70 centimeters. Modes, phone and digital modes.
Washington State QSO Party coming up, which is also called the Salmon Run, 1600 Zulu, September 16th to 2359 Zulu, September 17th. That's organized by the Western Washington DX Club. 160 through 6 meters. No contacts, though, on 60, 30, 17, or 12 meters are permitted. It is a phone and CW contest, or QSO Party.
There's the New Jersey QSO Party, 1600 Zulu, September 16th to 0359 Zulu, September 17th, organized by the Burlington County Radio Club. 80, 40, 20, 15, and 10 meters only. CW, phone, and digital.
I know a lot of people look for the Parks on the Air amateur radio stations. The Wisconsin Parks on the Air event will take place 1600 to 2300 Zulu, September the 16th. It's organized by the Fox City Amateur Radio Club. 75, 40, 20, 15, 10, 6, and 2 meters. SSB, CW, and FM modes.
And there is the North American Sprint RTTY, 0 hours Zulu to 04 hours Zulu, September 17th, organized by the National Contest Journal. Bands 80, 40, and 20 meters, RTTY only.
All right, there you have it. Lots of events to participate in coming up next weekend. Check them out if you're into ham radio, and if you're a shortwave listener, you can tune them in as well. That's going to do it for us today. As we said, we do put up the links to our stories on the YouTube channel and on our X account or Twitter account. We do have our Facebook group that you can participate in as well. Look for us, International Radio Report, on Facebook. So have a great week, everyone. We'll talk to you again next Sunday with our next edition of our program, the International Radio Report, on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal. Have a great week, everybody.
Bye-bye.